This is Authentic Talks, where we ask the hard questions and challenge the status quo in cybersecurity and identity. We bring you real conversations with leaders who believe authenticity is the key to trust and transformation.
This is a brand new podcast for HID that we're bringing to the market, and we will get real about everything around authentication, identity, access management. So basically, the purpose is no corporate jargon, no sugarcoating, just authentic, honest conversation about what's really going on in our world. So if you like me, just grab your cup of coffee, settle in, and let's kick off this very first podcast. So to debut, we're going to tackle that with a very big question. Is trust dead in the age of AI? And for me, who's getting older every day, sometimes it feels like you're outdated before even starting. And to help me unpack this, I'd like to introduce you to my partner in crime for today, Rich Gibson. As a co-host, and our very first guest, who we're very grateful for him to be here, Mark Dallmeier. So, Rich, can you just give us a little bit of background on who you are and why you're my partner in crime?
Yeah, thanks. And I'm looking forward to this. Happy to have Mark on. We're really excited to kick this series off. I would say, an amateur identity security enthusiast. Heading alliances here at HID, and really excited for the conversation.
Thank you very much, Ariel and Rich. Value and appreciate the opportunity to work with you on this podcast and at least share some perspective. So my name is Mark Dallmeier. I'm a 6-time founder, 3-time CEO of various technology and services companies. So currently working with Envoy Data. And I've known Envoy Data for at least a decade now in terms of physical security and cybersecurity distribution. But just a little bit more about my background. Just over the last 18 years have been building and running cybersecurity risk and regulatory compliance consultancies. And I was very fortunate and blessed to have an opportunity to be the CEO of a next generation enterprise detection and response platform company that was co-funded by the DoD and was incubated in a large prime contractor that did a lot of work in the federal space. So that was exciting times, right? Leading that type of technology and implementing that type of technology in not only the commercial industry, but in highly regulated industries that are under attack every day.
This is the core question that we have today, is like, with AI coming up, we are seeing news every day. I think Anthropic just dropped a new report in November about how agentic AI is now has been weaponized, and you can have mass-scale cyber attacks without even involving a human being. How do you see the idea of trust? How has it changed over the year? What's your take on that?
Wow. Yeah. So, turn the Wayback Machine way back, right? And we'll think about how photographic and signature-based evidence was enough, right? So, third-party authorities verifying, now it's third-party authority verifying biometrics, including MFA. Again, 50 years ago, passports, driver's license, right? Signatures was fine. With another validation or another credential to validate. And now that's not enough. MFA is not enough because of the aggressive, innovative cyber attacks that are out there, because of AI-powered cyber attacks that are out there. And so if you think about deep fakes, if you think about not just deep fakes, but a term that we called a few years ago and started using in the marketplace called brand jacking, where not only individuals are being impersonated, but actually corporations and their online presence are actually being impersonated, right? For fraud-based purposes, for theft-based purposes, for other malicious purposes. Now you begin to see like this significant tsunami of change that needs to take place within the authentication, identity, access management, and physical security space. And so these are all very alarming trends that we've seen grow over the last number of years. And so this is driving the innovation in the marketplace, and it's going to continue to drive disruption.
I think, we are going to 6 months or a year from now be sitting in an entirely different landscape, which can be both exciting and extremely frightening. I guess my question to you is, as you think about, and take this on any level you want, I mean, there's personal change we're going to go through, there's professional change, there's geopolitical change, just AI is transforming everything, and authentication is no different. Mm-hmm. What really, where do you see the opportunity, or what excites you most about the kind of the coming evolution, and what concerns you? So if you think about the spectrum, on the one end, great opportunity; on the other end, oh man, we got to watch out for this.
Wow. Great question. So first of all, I think just any organization that's trying to get their arms around this should be really focused on trying to understand like where they're at today, right? So, going through some type of automation and environmental analysis, and just current state understanding of, okay, where are we at today? Where is AI being used in the environment today? What are our OEM manufacturing partners, right, that power our businesses? What are they doing with AI, right? Not just at the software level, but in the form factor level, right, in the chip level. And then, like, what are our people doing? Right? Because at the end of the day, we all still run people businesses. And even though they're powered by technology, or they might be powered by AI. So, I think there are some extremely exciting things around automation, right? Around the onboarding experience, around the authentication experience, around the interactions that you can automate and are being automated with AI. There's a lot of exciting applications of AI in businesses. The biggest challenge and concern, which caused Ed Vasco and I to write the book that we wrote around AI, but the biggest challenge that we see is when AI is deployed ungoverned. When AI is deployed as a tool, not as an entity, that is a massive mistake that organizations are making. And we can unpack that a little bit more, but that's the concern, right? Because AI is being embedded in the majority of the software code. That's and architectures that are being released into the marketplace today. And then you have kind of standalone LLMs and other AI powered platforms that are now being leveraged by employees and are now being leveraged to do authentication. So how do you govern all of this?
Let me press you a little on that, because I think that's exactly kind of where my fear and some of the people that I talk to comes. Do you, on a philosophical level, Mark, do you think we have a frame of reference to understand the kind of the depth, breadth, and impact of what this change means? And what I'm getting at is, you mentioned, the first thing you need to do is a level set, right, to understand where you are. But do you feel like organizations and companies have a kind of a framework of understanding? And I'm thinking of, you mentioned a couple ways that AI is being deployed and is going to be deployed, and the ungovernance of that is the risk. Do we have a frame of reference that allows us to understand what a governance model looks like? Because I feel like this becomes so invasive and so pervasive that it's very difficult to get a kind of an analogy that we could use for a governance model. I'm just curious your thoughts there.
Yeah, I think for those of us that are gray hairs, right, that have been in the industry for a few decades, and we've been through some of the big tectonic shifts in the market, right? E-commerce, .com, BYOD, right? The knowledge worker, right, movement, etc. What we could do is look back at those massive tectonic shifts and say, how did organizations navigate moving their business from brick and mortar to online and e-commerce? And how did e-commerce trade get governed? Okay. And then the next one would be BYOD, right? Like, how did organizations address the requirements when people started bringing devices onto the corporate network? How did they implement governance, checks and balances, right? And that leads to zero trust, and that leads to MFA, right? And that leads to all of these other things. But for the most part, to answer your question, I think there are some legacy frameworks, and there's some new, right, frameworks by various industry associations and standards bodies that are being worked on that we can and should look at. But I go back to, if we look at AI as a non-intelligent entity or a non-intelligent technology, and you deploy it as such, if you deploy it as a tool, you're making a significant, dangerous mistake. And it's not just because it could go rogue, and we've seen this in environments. It's curious. It's a curious technology. It wants to learn, right? And if you don't put controls around it, and if you don't put governance around it, and that's why, in the book, we talk about, hey, a best practice would be, if you're deploying an AI-powered platform or technology or set of technologies, onboard that technology like an entity.
Yeah,
Why?
so really consider AI as your employee, and same rights, same obligations.
When you onboard an employee, you have to look at their access control, right? You limit their access. You limit where they should be in a facility, right? What facilities they should be active in, what access they have, what systems, what databases, what applications, right? So you put parameters, you put guardrails around these technologies, and then you manage and monitor that. The other side of this is, in our opinion, if you onboard it as an entity and you even provide it some type of persona, then it makes it a little bit more human. And if you onboard an entity into a team as another team member, that can assist and augment and support the other team members, i.e., it has a role, right? It has a function on a team. It's not just a tool. It's adding value and creating value to the team. Then you're going to address adoption challenges that these tools typically have. Because what we know is there's a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And the market's polarized. There are a lot of workers that are polarized around technology and around AI specifically. And you see this a lot in the arts. and being an illustrator and a designer early on in my career, and being hand trained to do that type of work before Corel hit, before Mac hit, before PageMaker and Quark and all the apps hit, I totally relate to the fear around being replaced by an application. And so there are a lot of people that are going to lean away from it versus lean into it and figure out how to leverage it so they can level up.
When we talked earlier preparing this show, we were talking about something that you've seen coming, the feeling of numbness that organizations have around AI. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, well, I think this comes back to resistance to change, right? And I also think that the market becomes numb, and they become deaf to risk, so to change. And we see this in conflicts in times of war, right? Like we saw this with September 11th, we saw this during COVID, we saw this during other major, right, disruption periods where there was so much news, and we've seen this in cyber and risk and physical and cybersecurity in the last decade. There's been so much money and so much propaganda and so much media coverage and so much news around this that people just get numb. They're like, yeah, another cyber attack. Yeah, my data's been breached. Yeah, I'll add it to 30 other times it's been breached. And so people just become numb. And I truly believe this is occurring and going to be occurring with AI. It's like, yeah, it's just another platform. Yeah, okay, it's smarter than we all are. And I mean, I think that at some point in time, we in the industry need to take ownership for the narrative and the sensationalizing that occurs in the market. And we're not doing ourselves any favors with employees and corporate decision makers by continuing to back the hearse into the kitchen and selling fear, right? That we're all going to be hacked and breached and we're all going to die. And again, that's just me, in my opinion, right? After having tens of thousands of conversations in the market with customers and seeing this massive wave of numbness and disregard hit the market. And so whenever you're not diligent and whenever you're numb to something, that's when the real damage hits, because you're not on your game. And so I think at some point in time, we just all need to be conscious that there is a numbness factor, right? That's occurring in the market, and it needs to force us to take a step back and say, how are we really delivering these solutions, and how are we really delivering this message, and are we doing so in a constructive, value-added, value creation way, or are we just really trying to scare people to do and force them to do what we want them to do?
Basically, what you're saying is like removing the emotions and looking at it the same way we looked at .com or e-commerce before, like from a business point of view. And what AI is a tool. It's a technology, and there is no need. Of course, there are threats and there are opportunities, but to harness the value of it, just look at it, remove the emotions, and try to see step by step what you can do with it.
Well, exactly. Look, I look back at the failure rates of IT projects, and we all know what the percentages are. And so when I read some of the recent reports, and I'm not going to call the reports out by name, but when they're reporting, a large X% of AI deployments are not creating value or providing a return on investment, is anybody surprised? How many enterprise IT projects or software projects or other process reengineering projects fail? And we know why they're failing. There's four top reasons. Number one, they didn't have all of the requirements. Boy, that's a shocker. Number two, you didn't have executive air cover and support. Another shocker. Number three, you didn't go down to the end users and get their feedback and perspective and input and involvement in an inclusive way. So you didn't get adoption, right? And number four, you didn't have the appropriate resources and budget. Those are the top four reasons why IT projects fail. So you take a big step back and you compare those four reasons against all of those AI projects, and I guarantee you a large percentage of those failed projects have those attributes.
If I follow your track here, you're telling us that we know it all already, so we have the blueprint already, right?
Yeah, we've lived through this. Like we know why these projects fail. So what we need to do, again, is, in my opinion, is be more disciplined, be more intentional, and be more thoughtful. This time around, with deploying this type of disruptive technology, the massive difference is that instead of deploying a platform like an ERP or a CRM or a data warehouse, right, or some other type of B2B supply chain automation or something, right, the massive difference is that the OEMs and the manufacturers themselves are infusing and re-architecting their software and their cloud environments, their SaaS environments, to be powered with AI. So it's much more pervasive the use of the technology has become so rapid and so pervasive because of the trillions of dollars that are being pumped into the market and now being recirculated by the large AI platform and manufacturing providers amongst themselves in the community, right? There's been a lot of news about that, a lot of coverage on that. And people are like, oh, this, this is kind of this weird, like people are calling it, a bubble. This is, they're kind of investing in each other. You know what? That's been happening in technology for decades. Strategic partnerships, corporations investing in each other, co-investing in ventures, right? There's nothing new about that. But what you see is this massive tsunami of continuous investment being driven into, again, not just the chips and the form factors, but the cloud, the applications, the systems, the third-party apps, the verification apps, et cetera.
Mark, getting back to your analogy, if we could use those tectonic shifts that happened in the past to kind of inform us in the future, there's probably, I'm thinking like the 5 major through lines for any huge technological shift. Like the first thing is inflated expectations, right? So everybody thinks AI is going to solve all the problems, save the world. Then we go into, which I think the phase we're in now is overinvestment and noise, right? That's what you were just talking about is the flood of money that comes in and the noise around it, the numbness that ensues. Then I think there's a correction, right? If we look back, you could see the correction that weeds out the weaker models. Then you get a long-term dominance, right? Which happens from the players that emerge out of that. But then is the last, which is a shift in how we work and how industries operate. I guess I'm interested in your view of, are we underestimating that last piece? Do we fully understand what is about to come once we get through the other 4 phases? Do you feel like we are underestimating that?
So Gartner's done a lot of work on this, and I think Gartner and others have a solid view and opinion on this, and I share some of those views and opinions. Meaning, I think you're going to see this hyper compressed, right, evolution and timeline, right? And Gartner calls it the trough of disillusionment, right? And you come out of the trough, and then you have dynamic value creation and automation. But I think the reality is work is already changing. Work has already changed, right? When you have millions of companies and hundreds of millions of consumers leveraging these technologies for personal augmentation and work augmentation and personal enhancement, which is the case, that is the case. You're already there. So the question isn't, like, are we going to see this consolidated and accelerated timeline to value or to usage and adoption? Number one, I think you're there. Number two, I think the way that we've historically thought about this adoption curve, right? Early stage, right? Hype cycle, trough of disillusionment, value creation, massive adoption. I think it will be broken. I think we're seeing that's being broken. And it's being broken because I think what you're going to see is this, especially in these technologies, because of the pervasive integration of these tools and technologies and this capability across all areas of technology usage and deployment and smart devices globally. Cars, wearables, computers, assets, right? We've had machine learning for decades. That's been powering a lot of the intelligence, right, in the apps that we've all been using for decades, right? The average consumer isn't aware of that. And so the reality is like, this has all been building for decades. Well, now that the genie's out of the bottle, you're going to see this massive adoption. So then you're going to have to go back to, okay, we had massive adoption in a lot of highly mature global markets and industries and consumerization. Now you're going to see, what's the next stage? Well, the next stage is massive innovation from an application and from an embedded AI play perspective, we're seeing that now. You guys are driving that, right? Like at HID and others in the market. So we're going to see that massive embedded application and capability integration. That's the 6 to 12 month window. And then you're going to see kind of this big explosion, in my opinion, of apps and tools and technology. Think about it like Linux. Think about it like Red Hat. Think about it like Visual Studio. So if we think about it from an SDK perspective, and you think about all the innovation and all the apps and everything that got built, once those right bodies of code were released into the wild, that's what I think you're going to see happen. So again, we have references to look at if we just think about it. But then, so I think you're going to see in 20 months, I think you're going to see this explosion and this continuous global adoption. And then eventually, I think organizations and people will begin to kind of settle down in the next 24 to 36 months to realize that, okay, this is not a hype, this is not flash in the pan, it's not just another technology. It will be the fundamental enabling engine for a vast amount of technology-enabled devices that we're using. And the reason I believe that is because when you have large cloud and global solution providers and global energy companies and power and utilities now coming together to try to figure out how to support, right, this technology, and you see large global cloud providers tipping their data center capacity over, it's tipping over, right? And so that's why you're seeing outages. So when you see that, they're all trying to solve for the next 24 to 36 months, which is there's not enough available power. Speak to the co-location and the data center providers. They'll tell you there's not enough power. And so like this power limitation thing is an issue. And then you light up quantum in the next 12 to 18 months in a big way because it's coming and we're all planning for it. Like, man, you want to talk about this massive eruption of value and advancement and apps and enablement. It's going to be significant. So again, you know, my thought is that we're not thinking about it the right way. We're using an old algorithm or an old perspective of how we used to think about technology lifecycle, and we're trying to apply it to something that's candidly going to break that and cause us to rethink what those life cycles are, because I think it's going to be much more iterative and accelerated. And I think we're just going to have to be very intentional and very deliberate, yet very conscious that we don't have all the answers.
So for the people that are listening to us and that are trying to have some actionable insight or to operate based on this podcast, how should they approach this? What would be the new scenario that they should look into and the new blueprint?
Yeah, you know, as a management consultant, I love walking into boards and companies and, you know, laying down the challenge of if you were going to build a company to destroy your existing company, what would that look like? Like, how would you architect and design your worst nightmare from a competitor perspective and sit down and think through that and really architect and design that, and then challenge yourself after you get through the end of that and ask yourself, how come we're not doing that?
Okay, so basically becoming your own agent of chaos.
Well, yeah, because this is why companies die, right? That this is, you could quote all the B school theses, right, and all the examples that we have because we've seen them all the last few decades. But, this is why Blockbuster doesn't exist anymore, right? Because of Netflix. And so, but it's like, okay, so start there, start with where are we at today, like we talked about earlier, like where are we at today? Where do we want to be? And what do we believe the biggest risk is to our company, to our industry? And do we know anything about what AI is doing in terms of creating chaos in our industry and our segment to other businesses? And if we don't, get educated on that, right? Reach out to people that are in the middle of the market or advising, get some perspective, and then challenge yourself to think differently. But with the backdrop of knowing that just about all of your technology that powers your business is being re-architected and infused with AI capabilities. Just understand that. That is a truth. So whether you're in robotics, right, whether you're in contract manufacturing, right, distributed manufacturing, whether you're in healthcare, right? I mean, we've seen all the headlines. Right? Robotics and greater levels of automation is here. Right? We're seeing this with autonomous cars. So like this is a massive movement in the next 3 to 5 years. So if you're not intentional, if you're not reflective, if you have a closed mind to this, right? These are elements of executive debt that I like to talk about, right? Closed-mindedness, kind of ego-based decisions, market blindness, not understanding, or you're not really caring what's happening in the market, and then making short-term decisions without thinking about long-term consequences. And so, like, if that's where you find yourself, just really try to move away from that mindset. I know it's really difficult, right? Because we all have, payroll to meet, and we all have, right, customers to service, and we all have shareholders or stakeholders to take care of. But I think at the end of the day, like, if we become more aware, self-aware of the realities that are coming down, right, the path, then we'll be better prepared for change.
We've been talking for quite some time now, and there was one question that we missed because this is our first time. So I think there was something that we would like to that we're asking every guest of the podcast, which is the authentic question. And I think Rich, you've prepared your authentic question for Mark.
Yeah, Mark, I guess we were curious on a moment in your career that completely changed how you think about technology or leadership, something that was pivotal in your trajectory, made you rethink or change or, reevaluate how you think about technology or leadership.
Wow. That's a lot to unpack, Rich.
You have 2 minutes.
No. So I guess what I would say is, like, if I was to reframe that, and maybe if I think about it around, hey, what's one piece of advice that you would give your younger self, right? In terms of things to look out for, or right, things to be aware of. And I guess from my perspective, what I would say is, don't waste time with companies or people that don't align to your core values. And if you make decisions in your career, and especially as an executive, based upon a strong set of core values, you can apply that to technology, right? So, and that's the other side of the question is, okay, well, Mark, you've been in technology for 3 decades. You've seen a lot, you've used a lot. What's your favorite technology? Well, my favorite technology when it first hit was the iPod. Why? Because it was mobile. I could take my music anywhere. And for me, music feeds my soul. So it was a personal thing. right? And then it became my iPad because it expanded my creativity, right? And my ability, right? So I think that those were the two things. But just in terms of deploying technologies, especially disruptive technologies, are the technologies being used to propagate your core values as a leadership team and as a company and your mission and your vision in the market? Is that what the technologies are doing? Or are the technologies actually just eroding culture, right? Creating another weird layer of abstraction between execution, the customer experience, your employee experience, right, and your core values and your mission that you're trying to deliver in the marketplace and your brand promise. Like, so are these things aligned? And I think if we fall back to, okay, this decision that we're making around technology, around usage, around product development, around people, does this embody our core values? Do we know what those core values are? And so like that's how I would answer that question, is always make decisions around technology and people and business as it supports and aligns your mission and your vision and your core values. And if you can't answer yes, then don't make the decision.
Because it's the first time, we'd like to do a short lightning round with you. So the idea for you would be to just answer as short as possible this interview. Okay, so
Let's go.
Let's go. And let me find my question. So, what was the first identity tool that you ever used?
First identity tool that I ever used. Well, it had to be a Social Security card.
Oh wow. Was it like a printed card that you had
Yeah,
on your
I still have my original.
You still have your original?
Yeah, that I was issued, at 15. I needed it to work. I didn't even have a driver's license yet.
Wow. With your
The license would
pictures?
have been the second one.
Okay, cool. That's nice. Um, what was your first big win in the identity and access management or authentication and security? Something that you're really proud of?
Well, coming from the cyber
Mhm.
security side, I would say it was being able to have a team member identify physical security gaps and capture the flag in a law enforcement organization. So we basically social engineered our way into a law enforcement environment, and our individual took a picture of themselves in front of a gun rack that was open and unlocked. So you think of that as a negative? No, that's a win.
That's a win for you.
That's a win. We potentially saved lives, right?
And
So
that comes
anytime
back
you
to
can
what?
save a life, anytime you can save a life, right, with some type of identity access management, physical security, either from an enforcement perspective, right?
Mhm.
So you prevented a negative situation, or you identified a potential negative situation so you can remediate it. See, in my mind, I just kind of reframe those things, and I'm like, man, that's a massive positive, right? So, and there are hundreds of social engineering, kind of physical engineering examples of that, just that we've had in our careers. But yeah, we've seen that, being able to lock secured facilities when attacks were going down, when active shooter situations were going down.
And because we've been talking about AI, we've been talking about trust. Your first experience with AI?
Yeah, I would say it was chat. Yeah, just being able to work with those various platforms and do research, spot check, learn prompts, take a scenario based approach. What I love about some of the feedback and training that's out there in the marketplace right now is they're teaching people, don't use these platforms like Google. And I think that that's really, really meaningful, because if you are a subject matter expert, or if you do have decades and decades of experience around a specific topic, like, to use Google and try to search a term around that topic, you're really dumbing yourself down. And so what's fascinating is that there will be a massive gap, like competency, skill, and experience gap in terms of users of these platforms that, again, many of us gray hairs have. So then the question is okay, well, what's actually the best way to create prompts? And now, there's a bunch of prompt cheat sheets, and there's actually training on this. And so again, this is part of that acceleration that I mentioned earlier, is it's going to be really interesting to see, right, how just the interface, the usage, and the self-guided experience around these platforms changes.
Yeah. So, and that's, again, to your point, stay curious and get curious, whether you are just an individual playing with AI or an organization trying to implement it
Mm-hmm.
or deploy it. And it's that mindset that will allow you not necessarily to win over the machine, but to stay competitive.
Mm-hmm. Well, and to innovate.
Yeah.
And to change.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you really want to be in 10 years the same version of yourself that you are today? Do you really want to live in the comfort zone? Because that's where people go to die.
Or enterprises.
Right.
Or companies.
Yeah. Don't be the same company 10 years from now that you are today. Why would you want that? For anybody. Right.
I just want to thank Mark for being our first pancake. Mark, we really appreciate that. It's not easy to do. I think for us, just for everybody listening, this is our first. We are planning, as Ariel said, a series of these. Our next episode, while this one's been great, is also going to be exciting. We're going to be looking at a 2025 kind of retrospective, what happened, what we should think about in 2026 in identity and authentication. We encourage you to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You don't want to miss an episode. And thanks again, Mark. I really, really appreciate the conversation, appreciate the honesty, and really, really enjoyed it.
If you're interested in the in Mark's book, Opportunity Size Squandered, Lost in AI Business Parable, we will put the links in the episode drop, and you can find that. We'll close it here.
Awesome. Thank you, team. I value and appreciate you.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you very much, Mark.
You've been listening to Authentic Talks. Ready to rethink what you know? Follow us on LinkedIn and join the conversation. Until next time, stay ahead, stay authentic.